Campbell from Northern Arizona University, and I'm here with my colleagues, Cheryl and Dion are my co-presenters from Penguin Random House. So Cheryl Herman and Dion Graham. And we are here to talk to you this morning about listening to learn and learning to listen. And so I'm going to kick this off with the learning how to listen piece, and then they're going to come in on some of the benefits of why we need, or what we can do once we've learned to listen properly. So we're going to start off with a little quiz, because it's morning and you've already had a warm-up session. So how many of you think you can't learn how to listen? You're either good at it or you're not. True or false? True or false? False. Well, and you can't say true to that, can you? Because then that would imply that you don't have a growth mindset right off the bat. Right? So you all heard yesterday you need a growth mindset. Listening requires very little effort. True or false?
False.
Good. Oh, you were so good. We use speaking skills more than listening skills. True. Yeah, we probably use them more, but should we be? Right? Good speakers are usually good listeners. I don't know whether I'm either one. I know I'm a good interrupter. You listen better as you get older. And listening involves only your ears. Okay, good. See,
Actually, the middle one is false. They're all false.
They're all false. They said that.
Oh no, they said true for speaking skills more than listening skills.
Oh, did
No,
they?
you use listening skills more than speaking. So 85% of what we learn through listening.
Right. I thought they, okay, never mind. Next. Great. So, as Cheryl just said, 85% of what we learn through listening. About half of your day you spend listening to something. We can improve through practice. Most listeners only retain about 20% of the content. It does not improve with age alone. So this is one of these things, like any other skill. It can be learned and you can practice how to do it. You can get better at it. And the average adult attention span is about 7 minutes, which we sort of know. Not very long. Most of college students, half of their day is spent listening to something, either you or somebody else or YouTube. There's really little instruction on effective listening. My background is definitely in study skills and looking at all those books, and it's just not included in much of that literature. And lecture right now is the number one thing that we are being told not to do, right? Engaged learning, the antithesis we are being told of engaged learning is lecture. My new favorite quote is that lecture is the Velveeta of teaching. I can get you the citation for that if you want that later. There is a citation for that. Right? And so we're being told to stop lecturing, which is what I'm doing, and get students engaged. But we use cases, discussions, problem solving. All these forms of what we're told is engaged learning actually requires listening. So it doesn't really make sense to not address the issue of listening. Just a couple pieces. Like I mentioned, it's not commonly included in study skills textbooks or learning strategy textbooks. If it is, it's usually stuck in the chapter on relationships and about interpersonal communication. It's not really addressed as a skill related to going to class and acquiring information. I did note it's not in the handbook of college reading and study strategy research, which is the holy grail of information for learning strategies. But it is important for interpersonal success and academic success because we need students to be able to acquire information through that medium. So as I looked at it, and this is the worst drawing of universal design or backwards design, right? I have violated every assumption of Wiggins and McTeague. But I was looking at sort of this process where we want students to take tests and discuss and participate. They have to take notes, reflection, which is high in the terms of the food chain of engaged learning. And that's how we assess learning, right? That's how we know that our learning outcomes were met or that students are doing what they need to be doing. but all of those things require listening. So we had our engaged learning activities, or even our Velveeta lecture. And then when we assessed them, but it really did have to be filtered through some sort of listening process, unless everything was done through reading. But that's pretty rare. Even if you're teaching online, you're probably asking students to listen to an annotated PowerPoint or watch YouTube videos or films that complement your course. So it's always really been part of the model, but we don't talk about it as much. So we're talking about it today. So we think that this is particularly important. I'm faculty, so you've heard me refer to class, those kinds of things. But course coordinators who are doing sort of any sort of revamping of courses across, you might think about how listening is also an important academic skill, just like time management and note-taking. And so if you're doing any sort of course redesign, we're encouraging you to think about listening as another thing that you might want to address. The basic study skills type of first-year seminar, which is the number 2 slot in terms of the most prevalent kind of seminar, is the learning strategies or the basic study skills, with extended orientation being number 1. But that's the second most common type. So we would encourage you to think about placing some information about listening there. And of course, student learning centers have the bevy, the menu, the beautiful menu, and we're constantly referring our students to those great resources. But that's maybe another opportunity where we could talk about listening and listening skills and the importance of listening. Here is a model. This is the Hurrier model that Brownwell proposed. It's not that old, it's kind of new, but this, if you look at that middle box, what I see is the top of the food chain of Bloom's taxonomy, right? Or the more critical thinking pieces of the Wiggins and McTeague facets of understanding. So when I see that, I think, okay, but so you have to hear it, that's just the auditory input. And then there's this translation of understanding what I heard, interpreting it, evaluating it, remembering it later, and then I can respond. I can respond in a discussion, I can respond in a test, I can write a reflection, but I had to hear that information and process it somehow in there in the middle. So, you ready? We're gonna hand off. There was something it'll come to me.
So you have questions?
I can direct the bus.
So I'm going to talk today just first about how audiobooks are on a real trajectory of incredible growth. For the second year in a row, it's been the fastest growing segment in publishing. So over the last 2 years, it's grown 40%, which is tremendous when you think about that. The Audio Publishers Association reported double-digit growth in its 2016 sales survey, and the market itself is approaching $2 billion. So what you're seeing is a real, audio's been steadily growing, but I'll get into it in a little bit why that's happening, what are the drivers of growth. But digital downloads are what is fueling the explosion. So it grew 38% in 2015. The numbers of 2016 are still being tallied. But just for a point of reference, revenue of hardcovers grew 8%, paperbacks grew 3%, and ebooks declined 11% that year. So when you're thinking about 38% growth, it's still really exciting. Some of those things, it's great, things are holding steady, but you're getting, when you're listening to a unabridged recording, you're getting the whole story, you're getting that empathy. So maybe some people aren't reading digitally as much, but a lot more people are listening to audiobooks, which is great. So let's look at what's driving the growth. So I broke it into 3 categories, which is enablers, title availability, and outreach. And so really it's the rise of the smartphone is really changing things for us. So according to the Pew Research Center's most current study, percentage of people in the US owning a cell phone is at 72%. And, a smartphone is at 72%. And that's placing us 4th in the world with penetration, and it's expected to climb. And so podcasting is on a similar trajectory as audiobooks. And what that's helping to do is raise awareness for the spoken word and engagement with the spoken word. And I'll talk a little bit more about podcasting in a minute. But when I moved over into the book publishing industry in 2000, so 16 years ago, 17 now, only 3,000 titles were published that year. And in 2015, we had over 35,000 titles published. So what you're having is a lot more accessibility and availability, and it's simultaneous as well. So that is, people are able to, basically, what is happening with both podcasting and with audiobooks is people can listen while they're doing other things, they can access things much more readily, and so they're really following a similar pattern of growth, which is really interesting to watch. So when you also combined the enablers with title availability, the outreach has just been, there's almost every other month there's a major story being published about audiobooks. And I'll talk a little bit later about the is listening cheating argument, which has taken a whole new kind of level of discourse, which is exciting to see. So next. So just a quick snapshot of who the audiobook listeners are. And for this, no one under 18 was surveyed. But what's exciting is that 55 million people in the past year have listened to an audiobook, and that's significant growth. And what is really exciting about that chart is with the category of 18 to 29-year-olds, it's at 32%. If you would have looked at that just 5 years ago, it would have looked very different. And again, it's because I think CDs weren't really reaching that group, and downloads are, which is exciting. Also, when you look at where people are listening, what we found really noteworthy is the 38% relaxing at home. Now again, 5 years ago, that would have been people in their cars commuting, would have been the lion's share, probably 40-something%. So what you're having are people are incorporating audio in ways other than the more traditional, which is commuting or traveling. So you're getting, exercising or crafting or gardening. And so the other thing is I wanted to show a breakdown of who's listening by gender. And so the lower ones are book readers, and book reading skews female. So about 55% of book readers are female. Now the nice thing is audiobooks it's very it's almost even. It's 49% to 51%. And when you flip to the next slide, here's a similar graph but with podcasting. It skews 11 points in the opposite direction, book reading to podcasting to male. And that's something I think it's a great way to reach maybe some non-readers is with podcasting short form, because a lot of people are graduating over to long form, which is audiobooks, but podcasting is a real great way to get people listening for the first time to subjects that they're interested in as well. So let's see, next one. And just one other thing. Edison reported that 57 million Americans listened to podcasting in the month of May 2016. So 55 million with audiobooks the whole year, but 57 with podcasting, a million in 1 month. And for point of reference, that survey was conducted 2 months after the finale of the second season of Serial. And so we say in the office the Harry Potter audiobook series is sort of the gateway to listening, and you could say the same thing about Serial. Serial had busted out in a way that we hadn't seen anything like that in a while, and it has not dropped off. There's been a great halo effect of people continuing and searching, and considering discoverability is a little challenging with podcasting, people are finding what they want, and it's exciting to see that many more people listening. So let's see. So if you wanted to do a deeper dive into podcasting, there's 2 good studies, one by the Pew Center and then also by Edison Research, which is, they post all their studies, so I really recommend going there. They've been doing listening, they call through the ear for years, but the reason why you probably are familiar with that is since 2003, they have done all the exit polls during elections for ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox, NBC, so that's their specialty, is elections. But audiobooks appeal to college students, and so there's a handout in the back of the room that's also in the new FYE catalog, which Penguin Random House has put out, but it ties audiobooks into the FYE program experience. And so on that, John Cheska, a beloved author, particularly in the children's sphere, it says, 21st century students have been pushing buttons since the get-go and are comfortable and attracted to devices in their learning space. So it's kind of an old traditional way of storytelling, the spoken word, then combining it with smartphones, and is I think, something that really can engage students. And I imagine that through traditional marketing, you're reaching the students and new social media trends, and having to keep up on all that, I'm sure, is something that's a big part of what you do to engage students. But audio content delivered and marketed in these clever ways, sending clips to students to get them excited or vote on a possible, if you're deciding between 2 or 3 books for a community read, we can provide extended clips. Authors are always very open to, we can pick pivotal scenes in the book, and we can really tailor these things so the students get a snapshot of what they're voting on. So here we just list some things, list some ways that you can meet the diverse needs of students. Some obvious ones, ELL students, I mean, audiobooks are great reading role models. International students, digital downloads can be sent long before they come to your campus, and it's a way to keep them feeling involved in maybe something before they can come over. And then we really do feel audiobooks engage non-readers. We have a whole website called Guys Listen, and there's been a lot of studies done about how they can really help motivate students that are not reading. They're in the secondary, it's reluctant readers. Here we have non-readers. They're great for multitaskers. We took a video into a middle school, and we were really surprised. We did it through the Audio Publishers Association, and so many of them were multitasking when they were listening. And then I personally love the human intimacy aspect of it, because a lot of us were read to when we were younger, and then just the history, going way back in our history, before things were written, stories were told, the Odyssey passed along. So I kind of mentioned before that the elephant in the room is listening cheating, and I know from speaking with some professors last night, they feel like in some ways it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't we include audio to catch a bigger net? But at the same time, they think some faculty members might, ruffle some feathers. And then in the case of in secondary schools and elementary schools, teachers and librarians are on board, and a lot of educators are wondering why that debate is still happening. But in reality, parents are sometimes thinking that the kids should be reading and not listening. And these 2 articles are in the back of the room. They're particularly interesting. One talks about why it's in the parent, like why as children we were given stars when we finished a book, or maybe a pizza if we were, did the Pizza Hut book-in promotion. So there's this reward system, whereas listening, it's not really taught in schools, and so there isn't this reward element to it. So that might be one reason why they shy away from thinking it would be a good experience for their kids. But what is really great about the debate is it's really, the discourse has gotten a much higher level. It used to be about a reviewer having to defend their love of listening to their book-loving friends, but now you have University of Virginia psychologist Daniel Willingham is quoted as saying, and that's in the New York Magazine article. He's quoted as saying, from the perspective of cognitive psychology, that is, the mental processes involved, there is no real difference between listening to a book and reading it. I mean, there is a difference in the decoding. That's definitely just reading. But when you're talking about listening, comprehension, it's your brain is functioning almost the same. So that's an interesting article. I encourage you to pick up. And yeah, sure.
So I don't think audiobooks are cheating, but in terms of the multitasking aspect, because I can imagine that a lot of students would be multitasking while they might be listening. So then what does that do to the attention and retention of the information? I mean, how are you?
They've only done studies with adults about a variety of things, and comprehension was very high at listening. They didn't always compare different multitasking, but they did a study that's coming out. Rose Brock, who is quoted a lot in here, it's not out yet, but she was saying that, and it was focused on she worked with adult librarians. That was the population survey. And comprehension in many respects was actually better with listening. And what they're still tallying is long-term versus short-term memory versus long-term memory. But I know multitasking, we were talking about that, it's a fallacy that you can really do what you're doing well.
Right.
But what they were talking about is kids were doing when they were cleaning their room. They were doing, and another very popular thing, and it's a real trend right now, is speed listening in Silicon Valley. It's a huge thing right now. Our business books are, when you look at percentage of growth in population, so basically you can code while you're listening, but you can't read and listen at the same time, because it literally, like I just said, it uses the same side of your brain, so everything gets jumbled. You actually can't do it. So, but what they do, and we've talked to people, is they speed it up too. They listen at 1.5 or 2 times the speed while they're working, which is like an interesting thing that's happening right now. Excellent. So I won't go through all these. I mean, I think it's in your packet, but it's all the things that are particularly good about listening and what it does for your students. And also, I do want to say, that one that says, though, the more accurate experience for literature and common reading, think about how we do casting. We're picking narrators that fit the story. So if there's, gritty urban dialect, or if there's southern accents, or it's a global tale where people are, in one part they're in Eastern Europe, and then they're in China. We get people that can do all the accents, speak all the languages. So that's another reason why it's great with ELL learners, because I think it delivers what the author's intentions are with these stories. And what we did here on the secondary school level is that sometimes teachers shy away from books that they don't feel they can read aloud well, which is a real shame, because that's limiting what the students are really. It's the opposite of what we're trying to do with diverse literature. And so next one. These are just some more things about when we were saying, listening and learning. And so what you have here are, part of that study is going to talk about the one that's coming out, but real-time information assisted organization is increased when your students are hearing lectures or audio in any respect. And then I did put a link on there for an article that was really great, and I found it last minute. I didn't print it out because I didn't have a chance to email people to make sure it was okay. But it came from the International Journal of Speech Language Pathology, and it's all about the importance of listening comprehension. But basically, they said reading comprehension comes from two things: word recognition, which is decoding, and also listening comprehension. Those two go together, and if listening comprehension isn't there, the student's success will suffer. And then I just wanted, before I turn it over to Dion, all the materials are available online at booksontake.com. And then these are the two sites. I mentioned here diversity. We do a lot with the We Need Diverse Books movement. And so that, Tom Bartholomeus, who's a librarian who actually was the chair of the Newbery Committee, he wrote that page for us, and it's all about how audiobooks bring that authenticity and then also motivation to the experience. It really does expand the reading experience. And then Read Proud, Listen Proud. Right now, Jazz Jennings is our author ambassador, and that's all our LGBTQ books and audiobooks. And that's a neat site. It is a little more geared towards teens, but there's adult materials on there as well. And what happened was we just noticed there wasn't a lot of really savvy, engaging websites that were available with LGBTQ literature, so we put that together. And then lastly, I forgot I have one more slide. Volumes is our free app, and I put my card on the table, and if any of you would like to have reviewer access, so you can get 4 to 5 books a month out. We can't really go further than a month out because to record from the final manuscript, our times are short. Like we can't do galleys, let's say, like books do 6 months out. But you can send me an email, and you can download it and get clips, but if you want to have the reviewer access, just send me an email, cherman@penguinrandomhouse.com, and I can get you signed up for that. AHAB is, if any of you think you've got talent, a lot of you are presenting regularly in front of rooms of people, that is our talent pool search. Because we're doing 1,100 titles next year, and although we'd love to clone Dion and have 6 of him in the studio at once, we do need to find new talent. So if any of your students are interested, you can upload a demo, and there's lots of things you check off. You can do certain accents, or you've lived in certain places. And then This Is the Author is our own podcast, and it's authors talking about recording their audiobooks. And this week with George Saunders' Lincoln in the Bardo podcast, which has 166 narrators on that program, including David Sedaris and a lot of Nick Offerman and just some really great Tina Fey. So it's going to be an amazing recording, but that's our 100th podcast that we've done. And I do recommend the Carrie Fisher one. We did do a podcast with her just this fall when she put out her book, The Princess Diaries. It's just a great listen. And now I am turning it over, for real, to Dion. Yes.
Because I'm always thinking about like strategy.
Yeah.
So when you said, and I understand the things that you're reading, you're reading and you're listening. So a lot of people will say they didn't read along while they're listening. Are you saying despite?
That's for people that haven't broken through literacy yet. Those are people that are getting maybe stopped by certain words and losing, not comprehending the sentence or the flow. I think if you're getting, that's I think a little more effective when we're talking elementary and secondary, but I know some of those things carry through. That is, I know a lot of ELL people that work with them use that method because it helps with inflection and tone, but it's not used as much in when kids are out of high school, I think. And then I did forget to say the ways that in which we can bring downloadable audiobook to your FYE programs are we can either connect with your intranet, and that can be a closed universe. And we are looking to do more pilots, so it's a good time to get involved. If, like for example, we were with Dion read Evicted, that's one of our books, Just Mercy, and it's read by Brian Stevenson. So there's lots of books that are all being considered and have been successful in the FYE programs that we have the audiobooks for. And then the other way is something like this. It's called a drop card, and there's a unique code on the back, and it can be downloaded once, either to a student's phone, their laptop, but just once. It can't be moved from device to device. And this is another neat way because they can be designed. They can have your logo on it, they can have the book on it. Just the back has to have some basic instructions, but the front can have anything on it.
Well, we're going to do the demonstration, then we'll do our questions. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Oh, that's good for whatever o'clock. So, hi, my name is Dion Graham. I'm an actor, and I'm also really privileged also to be able to be a narrator as well. Some of you are probably familiar with some of my work in film, television, maybe theater too. And some of you might be familiar with some of my work in audio. It's really great medium, as Cheryl and Rebecca were saying, for all kinds of reasons, because it's a way, I think that it's a way that you can really touch other humans in a very immediate way that can have a very lasting impact, no matter what the information is, whether it's nonfiction, fiction, coursework. Oftentimes we just receive the information differently. So that's a little bit about me. I'm not going to go on and on. We'll have a Q&A later. But I brought a few things for you to read, for you to listen to. And I'm going to read, actually. I chose a few short selections. The first one is from Matt Desmond's great new book called Evicted, which is, the title is Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City. And it really focuses on how evictions have great impact on not only the continuing cycle of poverty, but sometimes spiraling people down into poverty as well. So this is actually from that. Civic life, too, begins at home, allowing us to plant roots and take ownership over our community, participate in local politics, and reach out to neighbors in a spirit of solidarity and generosity. It is difficult to force a man out of himself and get him to take an interest in the affairs of the whole state, Alexis de Tocqueville once observed. But if it is a question of taking a road past his property, he sees at once that this small public matter has a bearing on his greatest private interests. It is only after we begin to see a street as our street, a public park as our park, a school, our school, that we can become engaged citizens, dedicating our time and resources for worthwhile causes, joining the neighborhood watch, volunteering to beautify a playground, or running for school board. Working on behalf of the common good is the engine of democracy, vital to our communities, cities, states, and ultimately, the nation. It is an outflow of the idealism and moralism of the American people, wrote Gunnar Myrdal. Some have called this impulse love of country, or patriotism, or the American spirit. But whatever its name, its foundation is the home. What else is a nation but a patchwork of cities and towns? Cities and towns, a patchwork of neighborhoods, and neighborhoods, a patchwork of homes. America is supposed to be a place where you can better yourself, your family, and your community. But this is only possible if you have a stable home. When Scott was provided with an affordable apartment through the Guest House's permanent housing program, he was able to stay off heroin, find meaningful work as a resident manager for homeless people, and began striving for independence. He remained stably housed and sober. And then there are the Hingstons. After Malik Jr. was born, Patrice and Doreen finally did move to Brownsville, Tennessee, a town of about 10,000. They found a nice 3-bedroom place. Out of the rat hole, Patrice earned her GED, impressing her teachers so much that she was named Adult Learner of the Year. Patrice went on to enroll in a local community college, where she took online classes in computers and criminal justice, hoping to one day become a parole officer. She liked to half joke, "I got a lot of friends who are criminal who are going to need my help." The persistence and brutality of American poverty can be disheartening, leaving us cynical about solutions. But as Scott and Patrice will tell you, a good home can serve as the sturdiest of footholds. When people have a place to live, they become better parents, workers, and citizens. If Arlene and Vanetta didn't have to dedicate 70 to 80% of their income to rent, they could keep their kids fed and clothed and off the streets. They could settle down in one neighborhood and enroll their children in one school, providing them the opportunity to form long-lasting relationships with friends, role models, and teachers. They could start a savings account or buy their children toys and books, perhaps even a home computer. The time and emotional energy spent making rent, delaying eviction, or finding another place to live when homeless could instead be spent on things that enriched their lives. Community college classes, exercise, finding a good job, maybe a good man too. But our current state of affairs reduces to poverty people born for better things. For almost a century, there has been broad consensus in America that families should spend no more than 30% of their income on housing. Until recently, most renting families met this goal. But times have changed. In Milwaukee and across America, every year in this country, people are evicted from their homes not by the tens of thousands or even the hundreds of thousands, but by the millions. Until recently, we simply didn't know how immense this problem was or how serious the consequences, unless we had suffered them ourselves. For years, social scientists, journalists, and policymakers all but ignored eviction, making it one of the least studied processes affecting the lives of poor families. But new data and methods have allowed us to measure the prevalence of eviction and document its effects. We have learned that eviction is commonplace in poor neighborhoods, and that it exacts a heavy toll on families, communities, and children. That's a section from that. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. And this is a little different, no less relevant, but it's a little different. This is from Dave Eggers' The Circle, which I also narrated, and it's going to be a movie soon. Is anybody in the room familiar with this book? Anybody read it? Okay. The section I'm reading from, okay, so The Circle, for those of you who don't know. The Circle, think of The Circle as Facebook plus Amazon plus Google all rolled into one. A big encompassing company that is getting more and more powerful by the day, and their tentacles are, well, they would not describe them as tentacles, let's just put it this way, their impact is felt in all areas of life, and increasingly so. So in this section, one of the leaders of the company is giving a internal talk, not unlike a TED Talk, but an internal talk rolling out a new product and a new vision that they have for something called Sea Change. And that refers to a camera that's very mobile that they're rolling out, and you'll see the rest of it. The audience applauded again. Now, remember that these cameras are cheap and easy to hide. They need no wires. So it hasn't been that hard for us to place them all over. Let's show Tahrir. gasps from the audience. On screen, there was now a live shot of Tahrir Square, the cradle of the Egyptian revolution. We've had our people in Cairo attaching cameras for the last week. They're so small, the army can't find them. They don't even know what to look for. Let's show the rest of the views. Camera 2, camera 3, 4, 5, 6. There were 6 shots of the square, each so clear that sweat on any face could be seen. The name tags of every soldier easily read. Now 7 through 50. Now there was a grid of 50 images, seeming to cover the entire public space. The audience roared again. Bailey raised his hands as if to say, not yet, there's plenty more. The square is quiet now, but can you imagine if something happened? There would be instant accountability. Any soldier committing an act of violence would instantly be recorded for posterity. He could be tried for war crimes, you name it. And even if they clear the square of journalists, the cameras are still there. And no matter how many times they try to eliminate the cameras because they're so small, they'll never know for sure where they are, who's placed them there, and when. And the not knowing will prevent abuses of power. And you take the average soldier who's now worried that a dozen cameras will catch him for all eternity, dragging some woman down the street. Well, he should worry. He should worry about these cameras. He should worry about sea change. That's what we're calling it. There was a quick burst of applause, which grew as the audience came to understand the double meaning at play. Like it? Bailey said. Okay, now, this doesn't just apply to areas of upheaval. Imagine any city with this kind of coverage. Who would commit a crime knowing they might be watched at any time, anywhere? My friends in the FBI feel this would cut crime rates down to 70, 80% less of whatever we're seeing now in any city where we have real and meaningful saturation. The applause grew. But for now, let's go back to the places in the world where we most need transparency and so rarely have it. Here's a medley of locations around the world where we've placed cameras. Now imagine the impact these cameras would have had in the past and will have in the future if similar events transpire. Here's 50 cameras in Tiananmen Square. Live shots from all over the square filled the screen, and the crowd erupted again. Bailey went on, revealing their coverage of a dozen authoritarian regimes, from Khartoum to Pyongyang, where the authorities had no idea they were being watched by 3,000 circlers in California, had no notion that they could be watched, that this technology was or would ever be possible. Now Bailey cleared the screen again and stepped forward toward the audience. You know what I say, right? In situations like this, I agree with The Hague, with human rights activists the world over. There needs to be accountability. Tyrants can no longer hide. There needs to be, and will be, documentation and accountability, and we need to bear witness. And to this end, I insist that all that happens should be known. The words dropped onto the screen. All that happens must be known. Folks, we're at the dawn of the Second Enlightenment. And I'm not talking about a new building on campus. I'm talking about an era where we don't allow the majority of human thought and action and achievement and learning to escape as if from a leaky bucket. We did that once before. It was called the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. If not for the monks, everything the world had ever learned would have been lost. Well, we live in a similar time, when we're losing the vast majority of what we do and see and learn. But it doesn't have to be that way. Not with these cameras, and not with the mission of the circle. He turned again toward the screen and read, inviting the audience to commit it to memory. All that happens must be known. He turned back to the audience and smiled. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. I think we all learned a couple things there. Do you have any questions? I know we asked you to hold yours.
I have a question about, I think a lot of us here probably manage common reading programs where we give books it's often good to have a text so we can refer to passages. So if I ordered all my freshmen a text, is there a way to then get that to become a limited access to an audio download so that if they wanted to listen to it over the summer, they would have that option, but they would have to text it in when we discuss?
Yeah, well, addressing the first question is yes. We do discounting, similar to what we do with the books. And I had mentioned we're trying to get more programs up, so it would be good to do it sooner, because I think we'll be generous because we would like to get them up and running and get it to a point that we can talk about how the students reacted to these things and then talk about the delivery of it. But the second question, are you asking, I mean, the intranet, I mean, we do this, I mentioned the Silicon Valley because we do this on intranets already. And we also work with Living Language, so we offer our language services, a lot of companies get it for their employees. So we have experience with that. We can work with, we have all our tech people that can work with your tech people and get it up. And also it's a great way, you can do a lot of promotion on that page too. You can have an interview with the author, an interview with the narrator, and like I said, the extended clips can be sent out leading up to maybe when they're going to be having a choice of the book or the audio. And there's ways to involve audio, I think, that can be unique and creative. And like I said, there's ways we can pull special clips too, which is I think an interesting thing as well.
If I could just add something to that. So Cheryl mentioned commonreads.com. I passed out a bookmark to a lot of folks. When you click on a title such as Underground Railroad or Evicted or The Circle, you can actually listen to an audio clip. There's a button right underneath the jacket. You can also download a high-resolution image of the cover, which I know is a big thing for a lot of programs. But you can listen to a clip on the website. 30 seconds, a brief clip, but get a flavor for the audiobook as well.
And all our clips, yes, we have clips on that site. We have clips on our Books on Tape site, and they're very embeddable. So you can actually embed them into your emails when you send them out. So they're living on SoundCloud, but there's also a way to embed them. We have that function as well.
Go ahead. I'm curious about the drop cards. So how does that work in terms of ordering for a common read?
Well, I'll just give you one too. So it has a audiobook on there, so you can download. And see the experience of it. But we print them, and we can do the design as well. We can work with your people. I'm going to a book festival in Texas, and we're printing 1,000 of 2 different authors' cards that they wanted us to give out to the teams that will be there. And that's something we design it, but it can look, it's all full approval. You say this, we want our logo, we want the book.
Well, what's the cost compared to the paperback version of the book? Because we buy them for our freshmen. So
well, it's the cost of the book, and then we're going to see if that becomes a more viable option. In the beginning, we'll absorb the cost for each one because there is a cost to print it, but eventually we'd work that into the pricing.
Okay.
Yes.
So I've always thought of myself as a terrible listener. I should take this button off. So how do you get better? I saw the model, but how do you get better?
Right. That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Yeah, I wondered if that was going to come up, especially with the multitasking. So, like any skill, it requires practice, right? And so, one of the things I really find appealing is this is great for common reads, but Penguin Random House can provide clips like you just heard at 5 minutes that are of selected things that are so compelling that would have students talking about, obviously The Circle, what we're going to talk about, the internet and privacy and social media. And so this would just explode into a discussion in your classroom, whether or not your students read the whole book or not. So by practicing listening to it, practicing taking notes, you could compare the notes that are taken through that process, the paraphrasing of that. I don't know if you've all seen some of the more recent studies about taking notes on your laptop in class and how bad that is for you, right? Because you're not paraphrasing is the biggest issue, as well as the multitasking and the distraction of it. But the biggest piece of that is that you're not paraphrasing. So you could practice. So they can listen to piece clips or listen to part of your common read or whatever you've chosen. But you already know what it is you wanted them to extract, and then you can see if they were able to extract it and talk about why did you miss it? How did you miss it? another thing we know interferes sometimes with understanding and processing is when emotion's involved, right? So when you listen to this clip, that's another great thing that we can talk about in practice with our students is, yeah, that upset you. And notice that once you got upset and you got triggered, it became all of a sudden a lot harder to take notes and process information. And how do we still those emotions so that we can still continue to participate in the discussion to get the outcomes that we want. So the bottom line is practice.
And then just my husband's an English teacher, and he was having a little trouble with a certain class, his AP English class, with Toni Morrison's Beloved. They were having trouble getting into her style of writing in the book, and he would play 10 minutes from the audiobook at the beginning of each class, and then by the end of that year, they marked that as their favorite book of the year. And it was the only book he played the audio for, and they were basically revolting. That's why he had to bring it in, and she reads it, so she has that honey voice, and you just hear, her sentence structure is a little different than I think a lot of authors out there, and so hearing her read it, it just unlocked the flow of it and how to take in her words. So that was another way of bringing it in.